Hello and welcome to Unstress. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Now, before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who for tens of thousands of years have nurtured the land on which we now live, with the process of respecting the people and the country, inseparable, connecting with people and country, reflecting on people and country, and directing their actions accordingly. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Well, I've been a health practitioner for over 40 years, but in the last 2 years, I have become a health coach, and with a particular focus on individual health coaching and workplace well-being. And what I've come to realise is that obviously we face daily challenges, but what is key is the mindset with which we approach those challenges. And then, of course, how we recover each and every day. But when one of those challenges is a serious illness, well, that requires recovery on a much broader scale. But lessons to be learned from daily recovery and recovery from illness. But mindset is the key. Well, your mind can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. And reflecting back on a podcast that I did with Bruce Lipton, a mentor and hero of mine, who wrote a terrific book called The Biology of Belief, thoughts are things that attach to cell membranes, called those things are neurotransmitters, which attach to cell membranes and cause your genes to express themselves in either a positive or a negative way. So this is a really important aspect, mindset. Well, my guest today is Rob Pryor, Australian educator, author, musician. Well, in his 50s, Rob, like many people, was seriously stressed and actually sought psychological counselling with several practitioners and eventually found a psychotherapist that truly struck a chord, made a huge impact on his life, and he shares that story with us today. But the two of them went on to co-write in 2011 a book called Say Hello to Happiness, The Healing Mindset. But in 2013, Rob, like many people in Australia and in fact globally, experienced his worst nightmare when he was diagnosed with late stage 3 kidney cancer and a damaged liver. Now, that story that ensued is a truly inspiring and empowering story. It led to his second book, The Healing Power of Cancer, a true story of determination and spiritual transformation. Well, Rob did indeed experience a remarkable emotional and creative transformation. How could that worst nightmare become his greatest blessing? Now, you may be listening to this or you may be watching this on YouTube. So, spoiler alert, I'm going to describe the man I talked to in 2024. I chatted with him 11 years after that devastating diagnosis that was supposedly devastating. And I can tell you the man that sat before me is a very fit and healthy looking man in his 60s. So the story, whether you have had a diagnosis or not, is a great story for us all in sickness and in health. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Rob Pryor. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Hello, Ron. Great to be here.
Rob, you have you've got quite a story to tell, and your background is education, and you've written 2 books. The first of which is called "Say Hello to Happiness: The Healing Mindset," which you first did co-authored with Michael Adamides, a psychologist, in 2011, and then did a second edition in 2022. And then you've written another book called The Healing Power of Cancer. I know something happened in between all of that was significant. I wondered if you might share with us a little bit about your story. Firstly, how you came to write the first book, and then what happened.
Okay, the first book. Well, I guess the short, concise version of the story is I had major emotional crises in the 1990s. I was in a particular relationship and started off fabulously, as they always do, madly in love. And then things started to go wrong and reach crisis point time and time again, and became very problematic, very stressful, more than stressful. And I sought help from different therapists who were very lovely people but achieved precisely nothing. A whole string of them had the best of intentions but didn't really shift me to a better place. So eventually someone said, there's only one person you should see, and that's Michael Adamides. He is one of the most brilliant psychotherapists around, possibly one of the most brilliant in the world. I said, oh, that's a big claim. They said, well, go and see him, see what you think. And they were right. Within the first session, 80% of my stress and anxiety and anger and resentment and all that had disappeared or released, however you want to call it. And I was impressed. I thought, this guy's amazing. He's achieving what other people couldn't achieve. He's the real deal. And he's got his own original technique called DPC, dysfunctional pattern clearing, along with breath work, otherwise known as rebirthing, which are all very powerful techniques and got me to a better place. Very quickly, very effective. He knew exactly what he was doing.
So Rob, just to pause there for a moment, because having had experience with different psychotherapists, and to have that kind of an impact within your first session, and I might just share with you that I've had a similar experience with a therapist as well in the first session. Share with us, what was it that was different in that first period, in that first session? I mean, he's clearly articulated some techniques, but they obviously resonated with you.
Well, I think number one, he has a profound understanding of human psychology, and it comes a lot from his own experience and his own crises and traumas earlier in his life, which he'd managed to release and resolve, which put him in a strong position so he could relate to what the client is going through. But also his techniques are very precise. They're very like a detective, where he actually, within the first 20 to 30 minutes, he figures out precisely what is causing your emotional disturbance. And by asking a series of questions. I think it's an extension of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
Yep.
But then also, I think there's that wonderful mystical dimension of intuition, which is hard to quantify, where he just feels, he senses energetically where the client is at. And he can sense that's the wrong road to go down. So he tries a different line of questioning and he goes down a different road. And he can sense by your aura, your vibration, that this is the right road to go down. And before you know it, you're sitting there as a client and you start crying. And he said, this is good, we're releasing it. And it is good. That at first I thought this is weird. And then I thought, no, this is the intention, is to release these pent-up emotions that have been there for years or even decades. And so I started to get to understand the process as a client, as a patient. And he's got a very analytical mind. So he looks at it from a scientific point of view. It's not considered a hard science. Psychology has always been considered a soft science, but I think his approach is more the hard science way, that there are precise reasons for things. And in fact, he whittled it down, he narrowed it down, that he believes there are only three primal, subconscious, limiting beliefs that any human being holds, which causes any kind of emotional disturbance.
Wow. Now, I noticed that in your book. I noticed that in that book,
yeah.
And I was going to ask you about that. But go on, just give us a high level.
It took him years to figure it out. At one point, he thought there might be 4 categories of beliefs that cause people to be upset. Some people would say, oh, I'm upset because she said that to me, or he broke a promise, or this happened or that happened. But he said, no, that's not why we're upset. We're upset by the way we interpret the things that are happening, not what's actually happening. Those things might be triggers, but they're only triggers for something that's already inside of you. And I know Wayne Dyer is one of my heroes, American author and speaker, talks about the orange juice effect, that if you cut open an orange and squeeze it, what comes out? Orange juice. And then he says, why? And you don't know where he's going with this, but he said, because there's orange juice inside of you. And he said, now, if you take an angry person and you squeeze them, anger comes out. But if that person no longer has anger, if the anger's been eliminated, you can squeeze them and anger will not come out. They might laugh or come back with a quick retort, or, they won't be angry. That's something that happens. So
what are those 3 high-level beliefs? Just give us the high level. I'd love to get Michael on to discuss it further, but I'm just intrigued.
Number 1, I am unworthy. Number 2, I am unsafe. And number 3, I am alone. And he claims, and I believe this because I spent 3.5 years co-writing this book with him, Say Hello to Happiness. And I actually challenged him in the early stages and said, well, I'm going to test this theory. I'm going to try and shred it. I'm going to try and discredit this theory, not discredit, but demolish it. As a scientist, I want to see if it's robust. So I said, what about this situation and that situation, this? He said, well, that first one you mentioned would be a combination of the first two beliefs. The second one you mentioned would be exclusively the third. The third one you mentioned might be all three beliefs kicking into place, such as when a relationship breaks up, you may feel unworthy because why would that person leave you? Unsafe because that person helped me financially to pay my bills. We were contributing on the rent or the mortgage together, or there could be other reasons you're unsafe. And then third, I am alone. Well, that's pretty obvious that if a relationship's broken up, you can easily feel alone, that person who's the love of my life is no longer there. So he said that would be all three beliefs are kicking into place. He said, but again, it's not the external trigger that's causing the grief. It's your own interpretation of it, because you could say, well, that relationship wasn't working. I must be ready for something better around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that is a possibility. It's like if you get fired from your job, maybe you're just about to get a better job. It is possible. And I know many people where exactly that's happened. They've lost a lucrative job. They've been despondent about it, but then they try and pick themselves up, adopt a positive attitude. And what do you know? A few days or a few weeks later, bang, they've got a new job, which is more fulfilling, better remuneration, better staff to work with, more room for promotion. Just everything about it is better than the last job. So it's all in the mind. Everything is in the mind.
Yeah.
Our perception of life is everything.
Yes, and that's quite liberating, isn't it? Because it's a theme that we've explored on this podcast, and I have in my own book, A Life Less Stressed, and that is that while we do not have control over other people and events in the world, we do have control about how we think about those things. And in fact, that's our biggest control.
Well, I agree with what you said, and I would make a distinction on this point.
Okay.
You said we don't have control of the events and the people external to ourselves and what happens. But I think what happens is as you adopt a more positive, more resourceful, more resilient attitude to life, the human aura, so one's own aura, is actually magnetic, and you actually draw the people and the circumstances and the opportunities that you deserve. Now, if your attitude is very negative and resentful and hostile, unfortunately, you're probably going to attract people who are going to give you grief and circumstances which are less than desirable. If your attitude is loving, particularly positive, optimistic, resourceful, you're probably going to attract some really beautiful, amazing people and some extraordinary opportunities into your life, because there is that like attracts like principle of the universe, I do believe.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And I actually believe that if we explore 5 particular powers that we have, and that is to explore what other people are doing, to empathize with them, then we can innovate and see where to go and really put things in place. So this gets very to the center of something, this is music to my ears, Rob, this story of yours, because it's one that I share passionately with you. So you've written this book, you've had this, what did he call it again? Dysfunctional pattern
clearing. DPC, dysfunctional pattern clearing.
Love it.
It's his own original technique. It's very well refined. He's actually trained other therapists to use his techniques. And it's well documented in our book.
Yes. And I also love the incorporation of breath work into this. I mean, the secret to living a healthy life, we talk about breath on this program, although rebirthing is something that I definitely need to do a program on with the breath work that goes with that. But let's, you wrote this book, you collaborated on this book. The first edition came out in 2011. But your second book gives us a clue as to what may have happened to you along the way. Tell us what happened next.
Well, I had a very successful educational business called Prior Education Australia. We coached, it's after school and weekend tuition for high school students, particularly the final exams, which are called the HSC, High School Certificate in New South Wales. We had thousands of students. It was a very successful business, which I founded and was the CEO. and taught mathematics classes. But there was a price that I paid for being a workaholic, which is that I wasn't looking after my health, which there's no excuse because you could do both. You could run a successful educational business and take care of your health, but I was eating the wrong sort of foods, not exercising enough, putting on weight, not getting sunshine, just doing all the wrong things. And my health was spiraling down, but it's gradual. You don't notice these things because you're focused on teaching classes and running the business and mentoring the students and all the things that go with it, hiring, training, occasionally firing someone. But you're focused on building the business and improving it. And so I took my eye off the ball, I suppose you could say, until late 2012. My health was really suffering. I was getting all sorts of aches and pains, lower back pain, which initially the chiropractor said was just wear and tear from the aging process, which I later found out to be not true, because when I lost the weight, about 98% of that back pain disappeared. So it cannot be just the aging process. And then I've also learned that the human body has the capacity to regenerate itself, even worn and torn joints and ligaments and just everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then by January, I was in a dreadful, dreadful state of health where I had a massive lump on my back, a rash, which was extremely itchy on my lower left leg, massive rash, like about 10 centimeters long, swelling under the ears, swelling under the arms, stabbing pains in my lower right abdomen 24/7, which makes it very hard to sleep. And when you go for a few nights in a row without sleep, you start to go a bit stir crazy. So that's exacerbating everything. Headaches, nausea, fatigue, the list goes on, bloodshot eyes. And I thought there's something dreadfully wrong here. At first, you just keep functioning and you think, all right, well, it's the aging process, but it wasn't. There was something going on. And I thought at one point I had a neurological disorder because I had the shakes. Now I can hold up my hands pretty steady. Back then, the hand would be like that. The whole body had the shakes. There was something dreadfully wrong. So went to the local medical centre. The GP was a very lovely fellow of British origin who arranged a whole series of blood tests, urine, feces, ultrasound scans, nothing. More blood tests, more everything tests, nothing. He said, look, it seems like you're in good health. I said, I'm not. I'm in terrible health. I feel like I'm dying. I've never felt so, I didn't know it was possible to feel so ill.
How old were you at this point?
Yeah, that would have been mid-50s.
Right. So not old.
No, I'm now in my mid-60s.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean. Not old.
Not old, no. And hopefully we've both got a long way to go.
Yes, but go on.
But eventually, when I was in the pathology clinic getting the ultrasound, the nurse took the initiative of calling a doctor in, and then the doctor said, can we do CT scans, CAT scans? Now, they're supposed to actually get the doctor's written referral, but she was asking to bend the rules. And I said, sure, let's just do it. Forget the protocols. I just want to find out what the hell is going on. I'm really ill. And when the scans came back, they showed a 6.5 centimeter tumor in my right kidney.
Wow.
Which was shocking, but at least I knew what was going on.
Yes.
And when I walked out of the GP's office after that information, I broke down crying. I was just shattered.
Interesting.
And then he arranged to see the specialist first thing the next morning, which is a Friday morning. And then the specialist confirmed and said, yes, he's 99% sure it's renal carcinoma, which means kidney cancer.
And prognosis?
Yes, recommended surgery ASAP. So this was a Friday. He said he could fit me in the coming Tuesday. And I said, who would the surgeon be? He said, me. Now, and he said, I think we need to move quickly on this. Your life's at stake and we really need to do something about this. Now, if I can, you didn't ask me this, but if I can throw this in, my 2 cents.
Yes.
From what I've gathered, many or most people would trust the doctor's advice and say, well, look, the doctor's the expert. I'm not the expert. They do this for a living. They're highly trained. If they say I must move quickly, I must move quickly. There's no time to muck around with this. But there's something about me that makes me question authority figures, which can be good and sometimes can be cause a bit of trouble. But mostly it's worked very well for me in my life. My father taught me to question government, corporations, media, even school.
Wow.
School teachers don't like it, but I questioned him Go
Yes.
ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I'm just going to say there's a whole story there which we could digress on, but
Mm.
I hear your father loud and clear, and in 2023 that message is more important than ever before. But go on.
I think so. Yes, and we can. I'll be happy to speak
Yeah,
with you
we can.
in a
Rob,
further podcast.
do me a favor, and just tilt your camera, your laptop down so I can your top of your head. No, it's disappearing the other way. That's it. Yes, I've
Gotcha.
lost the top of your head.
My top of my receding hairline.
That's all right. Go on.
So,
So you were not that keen
so
to go in on Tuesday
no,
for a
no, no. See, and I find this rather interesting because we're talking about mindset and psychology. My
mm-hmm,
intuition, I smelled a rat. I thought, and I started doing a bit of. I teach mathematics, and I started to do a little bit of a mental calculation. I said to him, "How much will the surgery cost?" And he said, "Well, if you don't have health insurance, it'll cost around 20,000." I said,
mm-hmm,
"Wow, okay. And how much of that goes to you?" He said, "Do you really need to know this?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to know it. Is it a secret?" He said, "No." Well, he said about 10,000 would go to me.
mm-hmm,
And I said, "The rest?" He said, "Well, it goes to the hospital fee, the room hire, the anaesthetist, and there are other expenses involved." I
mm,
said, "Fair enough." And I did a mental calculation and figured out he's probably earning around $500,000 a year, $500,000 a year. But I've spoken to people since then, and the consensus seems to be probably more than $1 million a year
mm,
gross. Now,
mm,
I've got no problem with anyone earning a living honestly and
mm,
contributing to community, but I just felt this is under a lot of pressure. You got to understand where I was really
mm, mm.
overwhelmed and anxious,
Yes, yes.
but I'm still.
This is quite a time to be making these kind of
I
calculations. I
know, I
mean,
know.
certainly shows a mindset there, Rob. Which go on. This is
Well,
intriguing. I like.
I've taught mathematics for 48 years now. It was 38
Yes,
years then that I
yes,
can't help myself.
yes.
So it served me well. I thought, could there be a financial incentive?
Mm-hmm.
It was just a question. And, is he trying to railroad me into this treatment?
Hmm.
So I said to him, "Can I think about it?" And he said, "Certainly, but I wouldn't think about it for too long."
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, I believe many people, and I've spoken to many people about this, dozens of people about it, and they said, "Well, surely you'd go by that advice. It's professional advice." I
Hmm.
said, "No, it made me want to go the opposite way. If he's trying to push me into it, it feels like coercion, and I don't like to be coerced into anything."
Hmm.
So I thought, well, I've got time to think about it, to contemplate it a little. I don't have to agree right here and now. It's like if you're in a used car sales yard, you don't have to agree right then and there that you're going to buy that vehicle. You can go to the next yard along and the next one and compare and go home and think about it overnight or even a week. You can take your time to make a informed decision and give informed consent in this case. So
Hmm.
I went down in the street. This was the Prince of Wales Hospital in Randwick, Sydney,
Mm-hmm.
and which is kind of irrelevant. It's just a big hospital. And walked down to the street again, broke down crying, thought,
Hmm.
oh my God, I just can't believe I'm smiling now, but I wasn't smiling then.
No, I can imagine.
This is just my worst nightmare. And this might sound crazy, but I thought bad things happen to other people. It's a terrible way to think because
Hmm.
anything can happen to anyone at any time. But
Hmm.
I thought, I can't believe this is happening. Other people get cancer. How could I possibly have a cancer diagnosis? How did this happen? So I called out Michael Adamides, who we were talking about earlier on. Now, he's not a
Hmm.
doctor. He's not a
Mm-hmm.
herbalist. He's not a naturopath. He's none of the above. He's a psychotherapist. But I consider him a very wise person
Mm-hmm.
and a very intuitive and learned person and just very insightful.
Hmm.
So I said to him, well, he knew the day before that I possibly had this diagnosis. Now I was confirming it with him. And I said, this is the diagnosis. This is the prognosis. What do you say? And he said, quick as a flash, don't get the surgery. I said,
Hmm.
wow, you're pretty definitive about that. My life's at stake. He said, that's why I'm saying it, because your
Wow.
life's at stake.
Wow.
He said, things can go wrong under the knife, you know. I said, yeah, but what are the odds? He said, higher than you might think. He said, and also, they're taking a vital organ out of your body. Don't just think they can cut it out and then you heal and then you bounce back and life goes on as normal. He said, it doesn't work like that. He said,
Hmm.
the human body is a sacred
Hmm.
organism, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
and you take something out and the whole body goes out of whack. We're not supposed to have a kidney removed. He said, we've got two kidneys for a very good reason. So I listened to him. I've always listened to him and I respect him enormously because he proved himself to be correct so many times in the past. People develop a reputation, don't they? When they're correct, and
Mm-hmm.
never falter and never tell lies or manipulate you, you develop a deep trust, and the trust just gets deeper and deeper the more that they treat you like that. So I trusted him, long history. And he said, listen, there's this fellow called Dr. Chris, who is an integrative doctor in the same holistic healing clinic that I practice my psychotherapy in Annandale, Sydney. He said he's got a very good track record for curing people of cancer. And I said, hang on, this sounds interesting, but slow down. Curing? Like, does that happen? Can you cure someone? You mean put them in remission? He said, no, not remission. No. He said, curing, where it's gone, the tumor's completely gone by natural processes, no slash burn or poison, and it never comes back. I said, that's a big claim. He said, I know, but he said, I've worked alongside this fellow for many years, and some of his clients, cancer clients, come to me for the psychotherapy part of the recovery. He said they go hand in hand, and I knew about that, mind, body, spirit. So he said, no, he's got a good track record, and this guy's the real deal. He said, you should try and see him as quickly as possible. So I managed to see Dr. Chris that same day. So it's all happening very quickly. You got the Thursday afternoon with the GP saying possible renal carcinoma, Friday morning with the specialist saying 99% sure, and then 2 p.m. the same day with the integrative doctor. It's happening very fast, because that's another thing. I don't muck around. If you've got something to deal with, you don't say, I must get around to it sometime. You do it as soon as you can.
I must admit, Rob, because I'm just still picturing you with swollen glands, rash, lump on the back of on your back,
Massive,
overweight, very unwell, given a diagnosis of renal cancer, which I think must have been quite advanced to be of that size.
Stage 3.
Stage 3. And all of these things going on and not having slept, so as well as that, and you make a call, which is great. Here we are in 2023 or 24, and I'm guessing, just looking at you, that things turned out well.
Oh, I'm top health. I'm in great health. I'm in better health than before I was sick even.
Isn't that interesting? Because we talk about mindset, and a little game that I like to play with my clients in coaching is a 3 gifts game, where think of the worst thing that has ever happened to you in your life and try to think of 3 positive things that came of it, even as difficult as that may be. And a lot of people say the diagnosis of cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me.
There's a whole chapter towards the end of my book, I'm just looking it up now, called, it's about the blessings that came,
okay.
Which is what you're talking about.
Yes.
Give me 1 second if you're interested, but you get the idea. It's called My Spiritual Transformation.
Yes.
I tapped into a newfound energy, gained greater self-esteem, a renewed sense of purpose. My brain fog lifted and everything started to sparkle. Being faced, I won't read very much.
Yeah.
Being faced with a life-threatening crisis was a golden opportunity to do some deep introspection and reinvent myself. In doing so, I have reclaimed my life. Then it goes on to say I lost 30 kilos in weight. I now feel young again and face each day with renewed vigor and purpose. I've learned that health is wealth. So, yes. Yeah, blessing. But, that's the mindset that we were talking about earlier that you have to adopt, and it works. Optimism works, and believing and visualizing that you're going to make it out the other end of the tunnel, it really works, because be careful what you wish for, be careful what you believe, because that's what you're going to create. Your dominant thought is going to create your reality. It's as simple as that. And I think a lot of cancer patients go into panic, which I did originally. I really did. And I really thought I was going to die. But I snapped myself out of it fairly quickly. Took a few days and a few weeks, and it's a gradual process. But I hauled myself out of that state and thought, no, God damn it, I'm going to live. I'm going to conquer this thing. I'm going to come hell or high water. I'm going to find a way of doing it. I'm going to find the people, the information, and whatever the right information is, I'm going to do it diligently, with discipline. I'm going to make this happen. So it's that determination that really does pay off. And it's not just wishful thinking, it's deeper than that.
Yes. And it's
but conversely, anyone who thinks, I'm a goner, this is a spiral into death, nothing, it's looking bleak, I can't see any way out of this, there's a good chance they are going to die, unfortunately, because that mental attitude is going to take them down the wrong road.
And it's so important, is it not, to really believe. I mean, not just to
Oh, yeah.
say, not
Yeah.
just to pay
Yeah.
lip service to
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
and have doubts in your mind.
Mm.
That's why the mind work is so important, because you really have to feel it. You really have to believe it.
You do. And I had to work on it. It didn't happen overnight.
Mm,
I was doing affirmations over and over again. Every day in every way, my health is improving. I trust my body's remarkable self-healing capacities. These sort of affirmations and many more over and over and over and over. Because by that stage, fortunately, I had enough knowledge from working with Michael on that first book and my own personal development a good 10 years earlier, that I was able to bring that to the table and apply it to my current situation of physical illness. Before it was emotional distress, now it was physical illness. So affirmations, and then as you say these affirmations, they sink deeper into the subconscious. And then you wake up one day and, like you were saying, you truly believe it. You're not faking it till you make it. You believe it in every fiber of your body. And I woke up one morning, I was smiling. I thought, what's that all about? My brain had processed it during my dream state to the point where I believed it on the deepest part of my being, on the deepest level of the subconscious mind. And I thought, I know I'm going to make it. Not I hope or I wish. I know this is going to happen with absolute certainty and clarity. And I even starting to learn how I'm going to do it. I've got a lot more to learn, but I know it's going to happen. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. And Michael was a colossal benefit in helping me to get to that point by clearing all the obstacles in my way and clearing the emotional triggers of the cancer. So I no longer had the anxiety. And once you're free of the anxiety, you can think clearly to make the right decisions as well. Plus, Dr. Bruce Lipton, if I can mention.
Yes, I've interviewed Bruce, and he's a hero of mine. But do
Oh,
go
yeah,
on.
me too.
The
The
biology of
biology
belief.
of belief, yeah.
Thoughts are things.
Oh,
They are
absolutely.
neurotransmitters that attach onto cell membranes and cause our genes to express themselves. That's a quote from
It
Bruce
sounds
that
like a quote. I love it.
it is a
And
quote, and I acknowledge him for it and
and
grateful.
he says the brain is the chemist. Now, what he means by like that is if you have stressful thoughts, negative thoughts, pessimistic thoughts, the brain instruct the body to release hormones such as cortisol, adrenaline, and epinephrine into the bloodstream. Once they go into the bloodstream, they cause a downward spiral in health. In other words, a spiral towards possibly death. So stressful thoughts could kill you. Your own thoughts could kill you, which is a type of unconscious suicide, I guess, and sabotage. That's the bad news. The good news is positive thoughts, optimistic thoughts cause the brain to release healing hormones into the bloodstream, such as oxytocin. I'm reading this off a list here. Vasopressin, human growth hormone, serotonin, and dopamine.
Yep.
And that causes the body to release healing hormone, but they are the healing hormones, which then precipitate healing in any part of your body. So this is very interesting because it starts to put a question mark above doctors and drugs. Now, doctors and drugs have a place, but when it comes to cancer, I believe naturopathic healing is the best way to go, mind, body, and spirit. It's got to be all dimensions. And I do think treatments such as chemotherapy are extremely dangerous. Finishing off one thread, I think that was a big part of my recovery, that once I got into this positive way of thinking it, and it's not just affirmations, it's closing your eyes and doing specific visualizations. What else? Meditation. I was doing meditation every day of the week, sometimes up to an hour. By the way, that in itself is interesting because not only did it create peace of mind, but I would start off in a meditation being with my physical body being in incredible pain, just torturous pain. By the end of the meditation session, the pain had either completely gone or almost completely gone. Now, I can't actually explain the science and the chemistry and the biology behind that, but I know from my own experience, that's what happened to me. And I've coached many people with cancer and I've helped them with meditation techniques. And then they've reported back to me that a similar things happened to them. Their pain has disappeared and their anxiety has certainly disappeared. So it just shows again that the mind, the body, and the spirit are all interwoven. You almost cannot separate them, that they're all the one thing, because really everything is energy. And once you get into the spiritual dimension, your energy is soaring. There's actually another author who's a hero of mine by the name of Dr. David Hawkins, wrote a book called Power versus Force. And he actually mapped out the 17 different levels of human consciousness. And it's a scale. He put it on a scale from 0 to 1,000. And as you become more positive, more loving, towards yourself and towards other people. It all starts with yourself, to accept yourself, to love yourself. Once you've got that, you'll project that onto other people. You start to see the good side of them. You start to resolve any differences you might have. You'll start to avoid having differences in the first place. And also, it will precipitate healing, physical healing of illness. So he's a big inspiration to me, Dr. David Hawkins. Power versus Force. Actually, there was a trilogy. The first was Power versus Force. The second book was The Eye of the I, EYE of the I, capital I. And the third book was just called I, just a single letter. You got to love the titles.
Yes.
The first book blew my mind. It's one of the most influential books I've ever read in my life, and Michael Adamides says the same thing. It recontextualized everything. But I started to see that you actually can embark on a self-improvement or self-healing journey where you ascend this ladder of consciousness, and you just become more and more at peace with yourself and with the world, and then more and more wonderful. You attract wonderful people and opportunities into your life, and it's just magical, and you can't even explain why it's happening. And I think a lot of that, in fact, was happening when I was on my healing journey. But I had to. I got to emphasize, I had to work on this. You know, I already had a good foundation from the healing I did with Michael, and then writing 3.5 years, co-writing the first book with Michael. So I already had those foundations, but I still had to work on it because there were still moments of doubt and anguish, anxiety. There's still a lot of fear and just uncertainty. I still had to work my way through that, but I worked diligently on that in itself as an exercise, because I realized the importance of that. Whereas many people who don't have that background they'd say to the doctor, look, you've prescribed the chemo, let's just do it. Let's give this thing a go. Let's kill this damn monster that's inside of me. Whereas I didn't see it as a monster inside of me. I saw that this was something I had created. Taking responsibility. I'd created my illness, so equally I could uncreate my illness, or if you like, create my wellness. That it's all about stepping into your power, into your autonomy, your sovereignty, and taking responsibility and saying, well, if I created it, I can create the wellness. I don't need to be pumped full of poisons, of highly toxic poisons.
You also created somebody that was 30 kilos overweight, and within that is a story in itself about how that you don't just wake up one day and find yourself 30 kilos overweight. You need to put a lot of effort into that.
Well, that wasn't planned or intended, believe it or not.
Losing of the weight?
No, that just happened spontaneously, with effortlessly, because I radically changed my diet. So I quit all sugars, including fruit. This was the advice given to me. Now, that's another key character in the story, by the way. An organic produce store owner by the name of Pete Melov in Sydney became my mentor. And I was just so blessed to find him. That's a story in itself, which may not be essential to tell, but it was when Dr. Chris had to go to Greece. Well, I'll tell it briefly. The integrative doctor, Chris, had to go to Greece for 3 weeks. He's originally Greek, and he had work and some family to catch up with. And I said, oh my God, I need you. You're saving my life. What am I going to do? He said, no, you'll be right. Just keep doing the things that I've told you. Stick to the protocol, stick to the lifestyle, and you'll continue to improve. And he said, before you blink, I'll be back in town. So I actually wasn't convinced by that. And I thought, maybe it's time for a new mentor, because maybe he's showed me all the tools in his toolbox. And within a short period of time, I stumbled across this guy, Pete Melov, who owned the organic produce store in the same street as my office at the time, believe it or not. And it was one particular day, I was in my office feeling very nauseous and thought, I'm going to get away from the computer, get out of the air-conditioned office, walk down the street and go to the children's playground for a change of scenery, some fresh air, sunshine. I knew that was good for me. Move my body. You can't just sit in a chair all day, sitting on your backside. So I went down there, and all these kids are laughing and screaming, carry on, which really lifted my spirits, because they know how to have fun. Adults, we lose that sense of fun often. And I looked across the road, and there's this store with red paint with white writing on it, "Don't panic, go organic." And then it says, all meals are sugar-free, dairy-free, gluten-free. There might have been something else. No tap water used. I thought, this looks interesting. And then it said free coconut with every purchase over $10. And then it said, below that, it said far infrared sauna, $10. And then I thought, what the hell is going on? Since when did a produce store have a sauna in it? This is just unbelievable. There's something going on here. And by that stage, I was starting to get interested in naturopathic remedies. So I went across the road and found myself face to face with this 6'4" muscly guy who's the owner of the store by the name of Pete Melov. And he said, "So how can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I've been diagnosed with kidney cancer." He said, "Oh, cancer is one of the easiest illnesses to cure." I said, "You serious?" He went, 100% serious. He said, "I've helped hundreds of people to cure themselves of cancer." I went, "Wow, you're the guy I've been looking for. This is incredible." He said, "Yeah, cancer's just a star sign."
Okay.
I thought he's funny. I like it. You got all these doctors who are deadly serious and wearing their nice, expensive jackets and ties and stethoscope around their head, maybe. And then here's this guy in a tank top, shorts and barefoot that many people would say, well, he's got no cred because he doesn't have all the letters after his name. But again, I'm a maverick. I'm unorthodox. I think outside the square. And I thought, no, I like the way he speaks. I don't care if he's barefoot. I do not care.
Well, he's earthing. He's earthing.
He's earthing. Exactly. And he started to talk about
earthing.
that at a later stage.
Yeah, he's earthing.
Earthing your body with Earth's magnetic field has a healing property that doctors are not taught. And by the way, I don't blame the doctors for a lot of this.
No.
I think their training is lacking.
Yes, I agree.
And you can actually trace a lot of it back to a guy called J.D. Rockefeller, who shut down the naturopathic healers right across America, who I believe were doing a fabulous job of curing people of cancer. And again, not remission, but curing them with herbs, juicing, enemas, herbal teas. There was a Canadian doctor called Renee Case who had her Essiac tea, which was a concoction of 4 different herbs. And people would flock from all over Canada and the United States with cancer to see her. She'd sell this tea at a very moderate price to them. She'd say, "Drink this morning, afternoon, and evening. Come back to me when you're ready." They'd come back a month later and say, "My doctor can't believe my tumor's shrunk down to 50%, 25% of its size." And she'd say, "I am delighted to hear that, but I am not surprised." This stuff works. This is nature's medicine. Mother Nature is benevolent. People who are religious would say God is benevolent. God has a plan. I'm not specifically religious. I'm very spiritual, but I do believe that Mother Nature has equipped planet Earth with all the medicines we need. We don't need to research. We don't need to make man-made toxic chemicals. That is all profit-driven. It's that Mother Nature, slippery elm, burdock root. I can't remember. There's 4 ingredients in her tea. They've all got powerful anti-cancer properties. So getting back to Pete Melov, I said to him, well, and he told me all other things like earthing and juicing, just sort of touched on these areas. Then I said, well, listen, before you go too far, I've got 2 friends who've also got cancer, and they're actually fairly famous musicians. One of them is Doc Neeson, the lead singer from the Angels. He said, "Oh, the Angels, Doc Neeson." He goes, "He's a legend. Of course I've heard of him." "Really? What's he got?" I said, "Oh, he's got a brain tumor." He said, "Right, go on." I said, "Well, my other friend is Don Martin, who plays bass guitar in a band called My Sex." And he said, "Oh," and he started to sing computer game, which people of our age, do you know that song?
I do. I went to school with a guy called Rick Rossman who played
and played in my brother's band, Matt Finish.
That's it. Oh, wow. Okay.
There you go.
Oh, here we go. World. Okay, small world. But anyway, do go on.
So Pete said, "I got an idea." And Don Martin had prostate cancer at the time. And Pete said, "I've got an idea. Rather than me bombarding you with all information now, what if we arrange a meeting where you, Doc, and Don, and I all get together, and I'll give you the complete rundown of what I believe cancer really is, because it's not what we're being told," he said. And because we're being told it's cells that are mutating out of control, trying to take over the body. He said, "I don't believe that for one moment. So I'll tell you what it really is. And I'll tell you how you made yourself sick, because you've done this. You've created the illness. It's not random. It doesn't happen to anyone at any time for no reason. There's things you've done to create this. And I'll tell you how you can cure yourself." And I like when he's saying cure yourself, not go into remission or make yourself. I said, "Does it work?" He goes, 100%. He said, "If you follow this, you're just going to get better and better." So we arranged time in the following week on a Wednesday afternoon, and the other 2 were available, and Doc brought his partner Annie along. So it was Doc, his partner Annie, Don, me, and Pete in this upstairs room in his organic produce store in Bondi Junction, Sydney. And it was a 3-hour meeting for which he charged us nothing. Pretty cool. Great guy. And it blew my mind. And I was taking notes furiously. It just all made sense. Everything he was saying made sense to me. I thought, wow, if he'd have asked $1,000 for this, I would have happily paid it, but he's giving it for free. So can't complain with that. But I did feel some sort of obligation to buy all my produce from him forevermore, which he said, no, you don't have to do that. I said, no, I want to do that because I trust your selection of produce. So, yeah, the meeting was very, is the word revelatory? Very.
That'll do. That'll do.
Great revelation.
Yes.
Mind-blowing. Do you want me to delve into a little bit?
Well, I mean, it is interesting because this is something that we've pursued on this podcast before, and this is a fundamental question about cancer. Is cancer a mutation of genes, in which case you're trying to identify that, or is it a metabolic disease? And
he says metabolic.
Yes, absolutely. Well, again, music to my ears. We've had on this podcast Professor Thomas Zayfried, who's written a textbook on cancer as a metabolic disease. And, this makes much more sense than cancer as genetic disease. And it dovetails into another concept which we constantly pursue on this program, and that is that good health makes sense, but it doesn't make dollars. And that is part of the problem why we find ourselves in such poor health. Apart from the fact that we're eating a lot of crappy food, we're exposed to a lot of environmental toxins, and we're stressed beyond belief. All of those things are a perfect model for poor health,
yes,
but not a very good health model. So this is, again, music to my ears. Rob, I had a feeling that we may have some sympathy with each other's point of view here. So do go on. No, I'm interested.
So he said, there's obviously a lot covered in 3 hours, but I can give you the tip of the iceberg.
Because it's not just, because I think the point here, just to bring us back, is mindset is critically important. It's the foundation on which everything is built, but you are not going to get away with it if you are still feeding yourself crap and doing everything that is not natural for your health. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And I've got to emphasize, it's a multi-pronged approach. Well, the recovery is a multi-pronged approach of mind, body, and spirit. So we're talking about radical change of diet, detoxification substances, detoxification protocols, change of lifestyle, change of mindset. So it's pretty far-reaching. Yes. I know a couple of people who've had cancer who've read my book, and they've actually said they love it. And then they've said, but it seems too much to take on. It's overwhelming. And I've said, well, any great goal, this is a very lofty goal that we're going for here, but it can be achieved. And I said, look, I do provide coaching, and if you want, I can coach you every step of the way and make it easy for you and chunk it down so that you're not being hit with everything all at once. So it is a multi-pronged approach. And yes, but I'd say diet and detox is probably about 40% of the secret. And I'd say mindset is probably about 60% if I had to put a rough figure on it.
Yeah. But this comes back to Michael Adamides' 3 primal beliefs. I am unworthy, I am unsafe, I am alone.
Yeah.
I mean, if it seems overwhelming what is in this book to save your own life, then you truly believe you are unworthy of doing it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I do know some people who've said, look, if my time has come, my time has come.
Yes.
Whereas my thought was, stuff that. My time has not come. I'm in my mid-50s. I want to get to 100.
Yeah. I remember my grandfather on his deathbed at the age of just under 90 saying, you know what, when you work out how long you're here for and you work out how long you're not here for, it seems really unfair. So, and that was at 90. And I know a lot of people who hadn't made 90 that would have loved to have got that far. So, when my time has come, I hope that time has come when I'm over 100. But anyway, do go on.
Or when you've achieved the things and experienced the things you want to experience.
Yeah.
And there was a lot more that I wanted to achieve and experience. So I just felt my time hadn't come. And also, I loved the challenge. Once I got over that initial shock, which is a massive shock, I then loved the challenge of, well, here's my next life challenge, the curveball that's been thrown at me. I'm going to solve, I've taught mathematics. I'm going to solve this like a mathematical problem. And sometimes my students this is all private coaching I've done. I've never taught in a school, but I've done a lot of private coaching groups, one-to-one, you name it. And my students will come along with a question and say, this question stumped my school teacher and it stumped me, and can you help me with it? It's like, whoa, deep breath. I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
And, at first it's a little bit scary, but you relish the challenge. And if you're positive and keep calm and focused, then you'll usually solve it. And so it's the same here, that this was a life challenge. Actually, if I can tell you this, I saw my journey as being in 4 stages. First of all, a problem, my worst nightmare. Stage 2, recontextualizing in their mind to being a challenge. It's not a problem, it's a challenge. And challenges can be conquered. Stage 3, it's actually an opportunity because I'm learning so much and improving myself in so many ways, mind, body, and spirit. And then number 4, eventually, blessing.
Yes.
So it's problem, challenge, opportunity, blessing. And eventually it was like, oh my God, this is actually one of the greatest blessings I've ever been given in my life.
Yeah.
But, it takes a lot of introspection and self contemplation and meditation and you name it to get to that point of blessing. But that's where I ended up.
But you've also mentioned the word compassion and self-compassion, because it really is an important thing. And it makes me realize how many great podcasts we've done. I'm doing a plug for my own podcast here, but we did
Go for it.
a different podcast with Professor Paul Gilbert, who has written the books on compassion and particularly self-compassion. And, the starting from a position of self-compassion is so important and so interesting to hear you and identify Michael's three primal beliefs. Self-compassion is a critical part of this process, that you are worthy of making all of the overwhelming steps that you outline in your book of mind, body, and soul. In order to do that, you have to have a very strong sense of compassion for yourself, that you are worthy of doing this.
Yes. Well, I prioritized my health at that point. And this is interesting too. And for anyone watching this who either is battling cancer or has battled cancer or has a loved one in that situation, I'd say you've really got to give your health and healing top priority. Now, you might think, well, that's a statement of the bleeding obvious, but it's not, because I've coached people where they haven't been giving it their top priority. They said, sorry, I've been really busy the last week. We had relatives staying over, and then we've had some, renovations of the house, and we're looking for a new car and this and that. And I said, okay, I hear all that. I get all that. Life is complex, but really I think you've got to reprioritize. You've got to make health your number one priority now, because we really are talking about life versus death, and you want to win this battle, and you can win this battle. So, some things you can't avoid, but with the family coming over, you can't use that as an excuse. Or you can say, I'm not telling them how to run their life, but maybe now's not the time for them to be coming over and visiting, which is, and it takes a lot of strength and sovereignty to say that, because then some people say, but that's not a very nice way to treat your family. It's not a very compassionate way to treat your family. I'll say, well, there's got to be a bit of, I don't know if selfishness is the word, probably self-care.
Self-compassion.
Self-compassion, where I'm in a dire situation now, they're not. And my survival is going to depend on me doing the right things. I have to make the time. And a lot of the things that I did took time. Going to the exercise. I was doing 75 minutes of power walking every day. So you've got to put aside that time.
And walking is so safe and sustainable, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And social
nothing.
and natural.
Yeah. I was listening to my favorite music on my headphones.
Yeah.
So it was lifting my spirit, which is part of the healing process. And then also I was doing far infrared saunas every second day. So that takes time. That's 45 minutes. But you've got to get to the place and you've got to get back. So it's not 45 minutes, probably an hour and a half all up by the time you've done all that. And much more. And there are all these things, all these protocols, all these things. You've got to buy the right food. You've got to prepare it yourself, because you're not eating at restaurants or takeaway food. You're preparing it yourself. And so it all takes time, and you've got to prioritize so that you make the time to do it, and you don't make excuses. Meditation takes time. I was meditating at least bare minimum 30 minutes a day, but usually around 60 minutes. Sometimes, and if I was a lot of pain, it might even be up to 90 minutes. So you've got to make the time to do that. But I pushed other things out of the way to do that. And the funny thing is, time is a bit elastic, that you still find you've got time to do all the other things, which is, I can't even explain that where there's a will, there's a way. So I still taught my maths classes. I still ran the colleges. I I still was writing. By the second half of the year, I was actually got back into music, and I was composing and recording songs with a singer called Glenn Bidmead in Sydney. We wrote over 120 songs in the space of 7 years and produced them to professional standard.
Wow.
Because and this the real point I'm trying to make here is that because the healing was not just physical, it was also mental and emotional. And suddenly this creativity came bursting through. God knows where it came from. All this creativity of all the lyrics and the music and the arrangements for songs. And even writing one song, if it's an original song and if it's different and creative and cool, it's a lot of work to do one song. It's more than you might think. And for the lyrics to be different to the last song and different to all the other songs that you've written, and you're not copying someone else, you're saying something different.
I often marvel at music. I mean, I'm not a writer or a musician myself, but I listen to it and I think someone has written that out on a piece of paper or has done that on an instrument and then produced it and put this instrument with that instrument. It's an incredibly creative process.
It is. And again, the point I'm trying to make to zoom in on that is I never expected that to happen. I was just trying to survive this terrible ordeal and heal myself physically. But unexpectedly, the mental and emotional and spiritual healing also happened as a byproduct. I think it's called pre-session, not pro-session, but pre-session. You're aiming to get from A to B, but along that journey, there are these little side roads left and right, which produce opportunities and experiences which you never expected, which sometimes can be more significant than the original journey you're on.
It's so interesting, Rob, too, isn't it? Coming back to the doctor and, look, I mean, I think they are a victim of their own education. And I think, and I really mean that, I think doctors have unwittingly presided over the worst epidemic in preventable diseases in human history. And they've unwittingly done that because in their education, they focus on pathology and the pharmacology to manage that or the surgery to manage it. But they've forgotten the first 1 or 2 years of all of our training, and that is anatomy and physiology and biochemistry. And when you work out what's gone wrong, at least you're open to correcting it. Because when you got your diagnosis of cancer and you might have said, what caused that? I'm pretty sure your doctor would have said, oh, just bad luck, your genes.
Yep.
Even though
could be genetic, he said.
Could be genetic. I think 90% of doctors would say that to their patients, even though, interestingly, it's accepted that if you had lung cancer, the very first thing they would say is, oh, did you smoke? Hang on, I thought it was just
work in a toxic environment.
Yeah, I thought it was just genetic. What has smoking got to do with anything,
Well, the connection they've made with smoking should be made with all types of cancer. But I also want to throw in, you've reminded me that you're not going to get the sort of emotional and creative and spiritual transformation that I experienced from chemotherapy, radiotherapy, or surgery. It's just not going to take you down that road. So we're not talking about an alternative path, something interesting. We're talking about, something profoundly different, something that heals at a very deep level. This is not to be dismissed as quackery or pseudoscience. This is profound healing we're talking about, which actually transforms every single cell in your body. And when I say transforms, I obviously mean to a better place. Whereas something like chemotherapy is highly toxic, and it's a short-term solution. It will put someone into remission, but it's not a cure, because generally people who get chemotherapy will have a recurrence within 1 or 2 or 3 years. And I've only recently found the reason for that. And that is, I don't know if you're aware, chemotherapy does not kill cancer stem cells. And this is well documented by multiple university research studies across the world. And so what happens is anyone who gets chemotherapy, the tumor, perhaps 99% of the cancer cells will be killed. They'll get a scan. The patient will get a scan and it will show no tumor. Naturally, the patient is delighted, and the family. And the doctors will say, yes, we appear to be successful, but remember, you must get regular testing. Generally, the patient will agree to that and say, of course, that makes sense. Of course, I'll get regular testing. We've got to keep an eye on this thing. What will generally happen is, because the cancer stem cells have not been killed, they will reseed, SEED, and a new tumor will form, usually in the same or a different place of the body, which is called metastasis. Then at one of these regular testing sessions or diagnoses, they'll determine that bad news, you've now got a tumor in either the same part of the body or a different part or multiple parts of the body. Now, what I'm saying is pretty scathing, but my research has shown that universities in Brazil, Japan, United States, Europe have come to the same conclusion over and over. Cancer does not kill stem cells. So then the question arises, what does kill cancer stem cells? And there are all sorts of natural foods that occur in nature which kill the cancer stem cells, like garlic, ginger, turmeric, broccoli, onion, apricot kernels, believe it or not. What else? I think
Well, a healthy
you get the idea.
A healthy immune system. But listen, this has been great, Rob. I thought we'd have an interesting discussion, and we'll of course have links to both of your books, and particularly the latest one, The Healing Power of Cancer. But Say Hello to Happiness: The Healing Mindset is a very catchy title, and clearly some very good stuff there. And I'd love to connect with Michael to explore that further. I look forward to an introduction there. But listen, let's just finish up. I want to take a step back from this story of yours, and you are clearly at the age of, I'm guessing, 60, mid-60s, 65.
66.
66.
Don't call me 65, I'm insulted.
But anyway, you are clearly in very good shape, and clearly much better shape than you were as a 50-something-year-old. So
Yep.
There's a testament to exactly what you're talking about. But taking a step back from all of that, because we are all on a health journey together through this modern world, as an individual, what do you think the biggest challenge is for someone on our health journey?
Oh, good question. Okay. Striving to learn about the secrets to health and healing, and then having the commitment and discipline to follow through. So, for instance, one of my challenges lately, my diet is pretty impeccable. It's all organic, natural, unprocessed. I know what I'm doing in that regard, but, a challenge for me is finding the time to exercise daily. And you can say, well, no excuses, you just make the time. But when your schedule's chock-a-block with work and research and writing and other good stuff, where do you find the time? Well, that's the challenge. You've got to make the time. It's that determination. You're going to make that time come hell or high water.
Yeah.
So first of all is learning, getting the information. I think that's where my book can help people. And my book will help people to learn how to prevent cancer as much as how to cure themselves of cancer. But then the follow through. So, grabbing a highlighter pen and think, right, Rob did A, B, C, D. I've got to now learn about that and get on to A, B, C, D. Not one day, but ASAP. Especially if you're very ill, there's an urgency to getting onto it.
Yeah. Rob, it's been so good to connect with you. I had a feeling we would have a great conversation, and I've really enjoyed it. We must actually get together in person because we're both in Sydney, and we will have links, of course, to your book and website. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure, Ron. Thank you.
Well, as I said, mindset. Wow, what a powerful force we have available to all of us. And I've been focusing in these last 6 months on positive psychology, and in particular, positive intelligence, PQ, your positive intelligence quotient. How often is your mind working for you, and how often is it working against you? And it turns out there's a little bit of a tipping point there, and it's worth exploring those things. Go and do a PQ assessment. Find out what saboteurs are going on in your mind. And I find this a really inspiring way of putting a language and a structure into the noise that's going on in your head, in my head all the time, in all of our heads. But I'm definitely going to be inviting, if I can, Michael Adamides back to follow up with this talk and with this discussion that I just had with Rob. And I think this week I might also re-release from the archives that wonderful discussion I had with Bruce Lipton quite a few years ago, and I must get him back on the program as well. I hope this has been inspiring and empowering for you. I found it a great conversation. We'll, of course, have links to Rob's website where those books are available. I hope this finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner.
guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.